22 years old, Parsons design prodigy, heiress to a $400 million textile empire, sleeping in the attic. For 6 months, she wore rags and scrubbed her own family's marble floors while her stepmother erased her from existence, until the night Colleen invited her to the Sanders Legacy Ball as a punchline. She had no idea she just invited the rightful CEO wearing her inheritance on her back. "You missed the corner," Colleen Sanders said, not looking up from her phone. The woman who'd married Petra's father and buried him within 2 years stood below, inspecting her manicure. She tapped a crimson nail against the screen, laughing at something. "Actually, you know what? Since the board insists you attend Saturday's ball, I had something special sent to your room." She looked up then, and her smile was surgical. "Wear it. I think it really captures who you are now." Her friends materialized from the parlor, champagne flutes in hand, designer gowns already hanging in garment bags. They circled the base of the ladder like sharks. "Oh, Colleen, you didn't," one of them gasped, trying not to laugh. "I did. Custom made." Petra said nothing, kept polishing. But her hand stilled for just a moment on the crystal, and in that fractured reflection she saw herself differently. Not broken, refracted, like light separating into something more powerful. "Let's see if she even has the nerve to show up," Colleen whispered, loud enough to carry. The women erupted in laughter, heels clicking away toward the wine cellar. Petra climbed down slowly, crossed the foyer, walked up 3 flights of stairs to the attic they'd moved her into after the funeral. And there, laid across her cot like a corpse, was a burlap sack, torn, stained, fraying at every seam. A note pinned to the chest. "Try not to embarrass us, sweetie. See." 6 months earlier, Petra Flores had watched her father's lawyer read a will that wasn't his. Colleen had stood beside the mahogany desk in the study, dabbing fake tears with a handkerchief, while the lawyer announced that Ricardo Flores had left everything to his beloved wife. The business, the estate, the legacy. Petra got nothing. "Miss Flores, I'm so sorry," the lawyer had said, and he'd looked genuinely confused. "Your father spoke of you constantly. I don't understand." Petra had understood perfectly. She'd seen Colleen hovering over her father's bedside in those final weeks, controlling his medication, limiting his visitors. By the end, he couldn't even hold a pen. She could have fought it, hired investigators, contested the will, but Petra had learned something in design school. Sometimes you have to let fabric unravel completely before you can see the pattern hidden underneath. So she'd stayed quiet, moved to the attic, put on the cheap uniform Colleen ordered her to wear, scrubbed floors she used to walk across freely, endured the cruelty, and she'd waited. Because what Colleen didn't know, what no one knew, was that Ricardo Flores had prepared for this. 2 years before his death, he'd taken Petra to a private atelier in the garment district. "If anything ever happens to me, mija," he'd said, "everything you need will be hidden where only you can find it. But you'll have to be brave enough to claim it." Inside, he'd shown her the plans for the Phoenix, a gown they'd designed together, crimson silk like spilled wine, rubies that caught light like drops of blood, and woven into the bodice, so intricate no one would notice unless they looked close, was a pattern that wasn't just beautiful. It was code. "When it's finished," he'd told her, "I'll hide it somewhere only you will find. Somewhere she'll never think to look." Now, Mrs. Park, the head housekeeper, found Petra in the attic that evening, staring at the burlap sack. "Ay, niña." The older woman's eyes filled with tears. "That evil woman. You don't have to go." Petra touched the rough fabric, felt every frayed thread. Then she smiled, and it was the first real smile she'd worn in 6 months. "I'm going, Mrs. Park." "Not in that." "You're not." "No." Petra stood, her eyes going to the far wall, the one with her grandmother's painting. "Not in that." Mrs. Park followed her gaze, confused. "Niña, what are you?" "My father left me something." Petra's voice was steady. Something Colleen doesn't know about. Something she can never take. Mrs. Park's eyes widened with understanding. You're going to fight back. Petra met her eyes, and for the first time in half a year, she didn't look like a maid. I'm the girl they tried to bury, she said quietly. They forgot I was a seed. The Sanders Legacy Ball was in 48 hours. Colleen would stand at that podium and announce herself as permanent CEO of Flores Textiles. The board would applaud, the press would take photos, and Petra would be forgotten, just another orphan erased by greed. Unless she walked through those ballroom doors wearing proof that some legacies can't be stolen, only inherited. She's the rightful heiress scrubbing chandeliers in rags, and her stepmother just gave her the perfect excuse to show up in $5 million worth of vindication. Drop a heart if you know this is about to be legendary. Petra's playing servant in her own house, but she's got a crimson gown and her father's final secret stitched into every seam. Subscribe to see how this unfolds, and comment where you're watching from. I will love to say hello to you, just to know how far our story is going. The Flores estate sat on Fifth Avenue like a crown jewel that had forgotten its own value. Petra knew every inch of it. The imported Italian marble in the foyer that her great-grandfather had installed in 1952. The hand-carved mahogany banister her father used to slide down as a boy. The library where 4 generations of Flores family secrets lived in leather-bound ledgers. Now she knew it from her knees. The marble was cold at 6 a.m. when she started scrubbing. Her hands, once soft from expensive lotion and careful preservation, a designer's hands were now raw and cracked. The brush moved in small circles, the same motion over and over, until her shoulders burned and her back screamed. Upstairs, Colleen was still asleep in the master suite. Petra's father's suite. In Petra's mother's bed. The thought made her scrub harder. By noon, Colleen's friends had arrived for their weekly luncheon. Petra heard them before she saw them, the sharp click of Louboutins on marble, the air kissing, the performative squeals of women who'd rather be anywhere else but had nowhere better to be. She was polishing the dining room sideboard when they swept in, trailing perfume and judgment. Oh, Colleen, you kept her? Vivian Lancaster's voice carried like shattering glass. I thought you were sending her to one of those homes. I tried. Colleen settled into the head chair, the one that had belonged to Ricardo Flores. But the board had opinions. Apparently, optics matter. She said the word like it tasted rotten. Petra kept her eyes down, her cloth moving in steady circles across the silver. Well, she certainly looks the part now, another woman said. Margaret? Petra couldn't remember. They all blurred together, faces pulled tight by surgeons, smiles that never reached their eyes. Doesn't she, though? Colleen's voice went sweet, which meant danger. Petra, darling, bring us the wine. The Chateau Margaux. You know which one. Petra knew. It was her father's favorite. He'd been saving it for her graduation from Parsons. She brought the bottle, poured carefully. Colleen's hand shot out, gripped her wrist hard enough to leave marks. Not that one, you idiot. The 09. This is the 12. Petra looked at the label. It was the 09. But she said nothing, just nodded, returned to the cellar, brought back the exact same bottle with the label facing away. Perfect, Colleen purred, releasing her. See, ladies, training takes time, but eventually even the dullest tools can learn. The women laughed. Petra walked back to the kitchen and held her wrist under cold water until the throbbing stopped. This was her life now. Invisible until she was useful. Visible only to be humiliated. But every night, alone in the attic, she remembered her father's voice. They can take everything from you, mija. Everything but what you carry inside. What she carried inside was fire. The memory came to her in pieces, usually late at night when the house finally went quiet. She'd been 19, home from Parsons for winter break. Her father had picked her up from the airport himself, unusual for a man who employed 3 drivers. He'd been buzzing with energy, talking fast, his eyes bright with something she couldn't name. Not yet, he'd said. Wait, they'd driven straight to the garment district, to a building she'd never noticed before, tucked between two warehouses. The elevator required a key. The hallway at the top was unmarked. And then, the atelier. Petra had gasped. Wall-to-wall fabric in every texture and weight imaginable. Silks from Lyon, wool from Savile Row, cotton so fine it looked like water. Sketches covered one entire wall, her father's work and hers, side by side. What is this? Ricardo Flores had smiled. The biggest smile she'd seen since her mother died. Our legacy. He'd pulled out a sketch, one she'd drawn 2 years earlier. A gown, crimson silk, structured bodice, a skirt that would move like liquid fire. Do you remember this? My final project for advanced construction. I got an A- because the professor said it was structurally impossible. Her father had laughed. Let's prove him wrong. They'd spent the next 6 months working in secret. Petra would take the train down from school on weekends. Her father would meet her, and they'd lose themselves in the work. Draping, cutting, stitching. He taught her techniques she'd never learned in school, old-world methods passed down through generations of Flores craftsmen. The gown took shape slowly. Crimson silk from a mill in Como that her great-grandfather had partnered with. A bodice so structured it could stand on its own, boned with titanium instead of plastic. A skirt cut on the bias, designed to catch light and throw it back like a weapon. And then the embroidery. Her father had brought in an artisan from Mumbai, a woman who could weave gold thread so fine it looked like paint. They'd worked together on the pattern, something intricate, mathematical, beautiful. What does it mean? Petra had asked, tracing the design with her finger. Her father had smiled. Insurance. He'd been sick then, though she hadn't wanted to see it. She'd been so focused on the work, on their time together, that she'd ignored how thin he'd gotten, how often he needed to rest, how carefully he moved. The gown was finished a week before he met Colleen Sanders at a charity benefit. 3 months after that, he was in the hospital. 6 months after that, he was gone. And the atelier, along with everything it contained, vanished. But the phoenix had never been stored there. Her father had been too careful for that. He'd hidden it somewhere else entirely, somewhere Colleen would never think to look. Colleen had moved fast, liquidated assets, consolidated accounts, erased evidence. By the time Petra returned from the funeral, even the building in the garment district had been sold. But some things couldn't be erased. If anything ever happens to me, Mija, her father had said the last time they'd been alone in the atelier, everything you need is here, but you'll have to be brave enough to claim it. She'd thought he meant the gown. She'd been wrong. The envelope arrived on a Wednesday, delivered by courier to the main house. Petra was emptying trash cans in the study when Colleen opened it, and she watched the woman's face go from bored to panicked in 3 seconds. What? Margaret was there, halfway through her 3rd glass of wine. What is it? The board. Colleen's voice was strangled. They're demanding Petra attend the Sanders Legacy Ball. So? Don't invite her. It's not a request, Colleen read from the letter, her hands shaking. In accordance with company bylaws, all direct descendants of the founder must be present at succession announcements. Legal requirement. She crumpled the letter, threw it across the room. It landed near Petra's feet. She picked it up slowly, pretended to read it for the first time. This is your fault, Colleen hissed. You told them. Petra said nothing. She hadn't told them, but someone had. Someone on the board remembered that Ricardo Flores had a daughter. Fine. Colleen's face had gone cold, calculating. She'll attend. I'll make sure of it. The smile that followed made Petra's stomach drop. That night, Colleen appeared in the attic doorway. She was holding a garment bag. Since you're legally required to attend, she said, her voice dripping false sweetness, I had something made for you. Custom. She laid the bag across Petra's cot like a corpse. I think it really captures your current position in this family. She left before Petra could respond. Petra waited until the footsteps faded, then unzipped the bag. Burlap. A sack made of rough, stained burlap, sewn together like a dress, frayed edges, holes at the seams, the kind of thing someone would use to store potatoes. A note was pinned to the chest. "Try not to embarrass us, sweetie. C." Petra sat down on the edge of the cot, the burlap rough against her fingers. For a long moment, she didn't move, didn't breathe. Then she started laughing. It wasn't a happy sound. It was the laugh of someone who'd finally seen the punchline to a very long, very cruel joke. Colleen thought this would break her. Colleen had just given her permission to fight back. The dress hung in Petra's closet, the real closet, the one in her old bedroom that Colleen had converted into a storage room. It wasn't much, just a simple black cocktail dress Petra had bought for presentations at Parsons. Conservative, elegant, appropriate. It would do for the ball. She smuggled it to the attic in pieces over 2 days, hiding fabric in cleaning supply buckets, carrying the bodice under her uniform shirt. By Thursday night, she had the whole thing laid out on her cot. The alterations would be simple. Take in the waist, shorten the hem, update the neckline. She had needles and thread hidden in the floorboards, the only tools she'd managed to save from the atelier before Colleen liquidated everything. She worked by candlelight after midnight, when the house was finally quiet. Her hands remembered the motions even after 6 months of scrubbing floors. Pin, tuck, stitch. The fabric moved under her fingers like it was alive. By Friday morning, just before dawn, she'd completed the final stitch. She'd hidden it under a loose floorboard, covered it with old newspapers, weighted it down with broken furniture. She allowed herself 2 hours of sleep before Colleen's morning inspection. She should have known Colleen would search the attic. Petra returned from grocery shopping to find her room destroyed. The cot overturned, the floorboards pried up, her few possessions scattered like trash. And in the center of the room, Colleen stood holding the black dress. "What's this?" Her voice was soft, dangerous. Petra's heart stopped. "An old dress. I was going to..." "Going to what? Show up looking presentable?" Colleen's laugh was acid. "Were you planning to embarrass me, Petra? Make me look like I don't take care of you?" She pulled scissors from her pocket. The fabric shears from the sewing room, professional grade, sharp enough to cut through anything. No. The first cut went through the bodice. Silk split like skin. Colleen kept cutting, methodical, destroying every seam, every careful alteration. The dress fell apart in pieces. When she was done, she dropped the scissors on the pile of ruined fabric. "You'll wear what I gave you," she said, "or you won't go at all. And if you don't go, the board will know exactly why." Poor, unstable Petra, too fragile to handle public events, too damaged to run a company. She stepped over the scraps of black silk and walked out. Petra stood frozen for a long moment, staring at the destruction. 6 days of work, her only option, gone. Then she knelt down, picked up a piece of the ruined dress, and started to cry. But not from sadness, from relief. Because now she didn't have a backup plan. Now, she had only one choice, the Phoenix. The attic was silent except for the sound of her breathing. Petra sat on the floor surrounded by scraps of ruined silk, her hands shaking, her mind racing. "Everything you need is here," her father had said. But where? Colleen had searched this room, had torn up the floorboards, emptied the closet, destroyed everything Petra owned. If there was a gown worth $5 million hidden here, Colleen would have found it. Unless her father had hidden it so well that even someone tearing the room apart wouldn't know where to look. Unless it required something Colleen didn't have. Unless it wasn't here. Petra stood slowly, brushed off her knees, and looked around the attic with new eyes. Her father had grown up in this house, had played in every room, explored every corner. He'd known things about this estate that even the staff didn't know. Secret passages, hidden safes, rooms that didn't appear on blueprints. He'd shown her one once, when she was 12, a panel in the library that opened to a staircase. She'd thought it was magic. "Old houses keep secrets," he'd told her. "You just have to know how to ask." Petra walked to the small window overlooking the garden, pressed her forehead against the glass. Think. What had he said in the atelier? If anything ever happens to me, everything you need is here. But you'll have to be brave enough to claim it. Here, not there. Here. She turned slowly, scanning the attic. It was barely 10 by 10, with slanted ceilings and exposed beams. There was nowhere to hide anything. Unless... Her eyes caught on the wall. The one that backed against the main house. The one that should have been load-bearing but looked wrong somehow. Too thick. Petra crossed to it, ran her hands along the plaster. Solid. No seams, no panels, nothing. But at eye level there was a painting. Small, unremarkable. A landscape of the Flores textile mill in Mexico, painted by her grandmother. It had hung in her father's study for years. After he died, someone had moved it up here. Petra lifted it off its hook. Behind it was a biometric scanner. Her breath caught. The technology was new, expensive, completely out of place in an attic that hadn't been updated since 1960. The screen glowed faint blue in the darkness. She pressed her thumb to it. Nothing. She tried again. Different finger. Nothing. Maybe it was broken. Maybe Colleen had found it already, disabled it, taken whatever was inside. Maybe. Your right index finger, her father's voice echoed in her memory. The one you use for detail work. That's your signature. Petra pressed her right index finger to the scanner and held her breath. The screen flashed green. Something inside the wall clicked, mechanical and final. And then the entire panel swung inward, silent on oiled hinges. Inside was darkness. Petra pulled out her phone, turned on the flashlight, and stepped through. The space was small, maybe 6 feet deep. Climate-controlled, she could hear the soft hum of a ventilation system. And hanging from a rack, preserved in archival tissue and a clear garment bag, was the Phoenix. Petra's knees went weak. She'd helped make it, had spent months cutting and stitching and embroidering, but she'd never seen it finished. Her father had insisted on completing the final details himself. By the time he'd showed her the photos, he was already in the hospital, and she'd been too devastated to care about a dress. Now, seeing it in person, she understood why he'd been so insistent. It was a masterpiece. The crimson silk seemed to glow in the flashlight beam. Deep red like arterial blood, like rubies, like fire. The bodice was structured perfection, every seam invisible, every bone precisely placed. The skirt was massive, easily 15 feet of fabric cut on the bias so it would move like water, but it was the embroidery that made her gasp. Gold thread covered the bodice, in an intricate pattern she'd helped design but never seen executed. Flowers that weren't quite flowers, vines that didn't quite follow nature's rules. Mathematical, precise, beautiful. And woven throughout, so subtle she almost missed it. Code. QR codes, she realized, her designer's eye catching the pattern. Dozens of them, integrated so seamlessly into the embroidery that they looked like decoration. You'd have to know what you were looking for to see them. Her father hadn't just made a dress. He'd made a weapon. Petra reached out with shaking hands and touched the silk. It was cool, smooth, perfect. Next to the gown was a small wooden box. Inside, a handwritten note in her father's writing. Mija, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And if I'm gone, it means I didn't move fast enough. This gown contains everything you need to reclaim what's yours. The embroidery isn't just beautiful, it's proof. Every QR code links to a document. My real will, video testimony recorded with my lawyers, financial records showing where the money actually went, evidence of fraud. I knew Colleen would try to erase you, so I erased nothing. I just hid it where only you would think to look. The Phoenix is yours. It always was. You designed it. You deserve to wear it. But more than that, you deserve to burn down the lies and rise from what's left. Be brave, my daughter. Diamonds are made under pressure. Te amo siempre, papa. Petra read the note 3 times. By the 3rd time, she wasn't crying anymore. She folded the note carefully, tucked it back in the box, and lifted the phoenix from its hanger. It was heavy, the silk, the boning, the embroidery, the hidden weight of justice. She carried it back through the hidden door, hung it carefully in the attic where the ruined black dress used to be. The Sanders Legacy Ball was tomorrow night. Colleen thought she'd won, thought she'd broken Petra down to nothing, humiliated her into submission, erased her from the narrative. She'd done the opposite. She'd given Petra a reason to rise. Petra sat on the edge of her cot, looking at the phoenix in the candlelight. The crimson silk seemed to pulse like a heartbeat, like fire, like the beginning of something that couldn't be stopped. Tomorrow, she'd walk into that ballroom, not as an orphan in rags, not as a servant who'd forgotten her name, as an heiress wearing proof that some legacies can't be stolen, only inherited, and Colleen Sanders was about to learn the difference. Saturday arrived like a death sentence, or a coronation. Petra wasn't sure which. She woke before dawn in the attic, her body used to the early hours. For a moment, she almost got up to start her cleaning routine muscle memory from 6 months of servitude. Then she saw the phoenix hanging in the corner, crimson silk catching the first light through the small window, and she remembered. Today, everything changed. Mrs. Park appeared at 7 with a tray of food Petra hadn't asked for. Toast, fruit, coffee. Real coffee, not the instant powder Colleen allowed her. "You need to eat," the older woman said, setting the tray down with shaking hands. Her eyes were wet. "I saw you go into that room last night, Nina. I don't know what you found, but whatever you're planning, I'm going to the ball," Petra said simply. Mrs. Park looked at the phoenix, looked back at Petra, and nodded. "Then you'll need your strength." They sat together in silence, eating breakfast while the house began to wake around them. Petra could hear Colleen's voice downstairs, sharp and commanding, barking orders at the catering staff. The ball would begin at 7. It was barely past 8 now. 11 hours to wait. 11 hours to prepare. After Mrs. Park left, Petra pulled out everything she'd hidden over the past 6 months. Makeup she'd salvaged from her old vanity before Colleen threw it away. Hair products tucked behind cleaning supplies. A pair of diamond earrings, small, elegant, her mother's that she'd sewn into the lining of her mattress. She laid everything out carefully, methodically. A battle plan. At 3 in the afternoon, she began. First, a shower. The attic bathroom barely had water pressure, but Petra stood under the lukewarm stream until her skin turned pink, washing away 6 months of invisibility. She scrubbed with soap that smelled like lavender, a small luxury she'd bought with coins saved from grocery trips. Clean. She needed to be clean. Hair next. Her natural curls had been pulled back in a tight, practical bun for half a year. Now she let them loose, worked conditioner through each section, felt them spring back to life. Her mother had taught her how to care for her hair, had made it a ritual every Sunday afternoon. Petra had forgotten how much she'd missed it. She braided it slowly, carefully. Not a simple braid, a crown, intricate and regal, wrapping around her head and secured with pins. Each twist of hair was deliberate. Each pin was armor. By 5, her hair was done. She looked in the small, cracked mirror and saw her mother looking back. The same cheekbones, the same eyes. But her mother had been soft, gentle. Petra had been made hard. Good. Makeup came next. Foundation first, evening out her skin tone. Concealer under her eyes, covering the shadows from too many sleepless nights. Contour to sharpen her features. She wanted to look carved from marble, untouchable. Eyeshadow in gold and bronze, making her brown eyes burn like whiskey in firelight. Eyeliner sharp enough to cut. Mascara that made her lashes look like weapons. And lipstick, deep red. The color of the phoenix, the color of blood. She pressed her lips together, left a perfect imprint on a tissue, and smiled at her reflection. Better. At 6, she stood in front of the phoenix and took a breath. The gown seemed to pulse in the dying light, alive with potential energy. Petra unzipped the garment bag slowly, reverently. The silk whispered against plastic like a secret being told. She stepped into it carefully, feeling the cool fabric slide against her skin. The bodice fit perfectly, of course it did. She'd designed it for her own measurements 2 years ago. The boning cinched her waist, supported her ribs, made her stand straighter. The off-shoulder sleeves sat precisely on her arms, restricting movement just enough to force grace. She couldn't reach the zipper herself. For a moment, panic fluttered in her chest. Then Mrs. Park appeared in the doorway, as if summoned by need. The older woman's hand flew to her mouth. "Dios mío," she whispered. "You look like my father's daughter, like a queen." Mrs. Park crossed the room, her hands gentle on the zipper. The sound of it closing was like a door locking, sealing Petra inside her transformation. When it reached the top, Mrs. Park stepped back. Petra turned to the mirror. She didn't recognize herself. The woman looking back was powerful, dangerous. The crimson silk clung to her like a second skin, the bodice structured so precisely it looked like armor. The skirt was massive, pooling on the floor like spilled wine, like blood, like fire. The gold embroidery caught the candlelight and threw it back, making her look like she was burning. The earrings, her mother's diamonds, caught the light too. Small, elegant, the only jewelry she wore. She didn't need more. The dress was the statement. She looked like wealth, like legacy, like someone who'd been born to rule and had simply been waiting for the right moment to claim her throne. Petra touched the bodice gently, felt the texture of the embroidery beneath her fingers, felt the weight of her father's final gift, his final weapon. "Thank you, Papa," she whispered. Mrs. Park was crying. "You're going to destroy her," Petra smiled. And it wasn't kind. That's the plan. Downstairs, in the ballroom that had taken 3 weeks and $200,000 to prepare, Colleen Sanders was holding court. The Sanders Legacy Ball was a spectacle. Crystal chandeliers imported from Austria, flowers flown in from Holland, a string quartet from the New York Philharmonic, 500 guests in designer gowns and custom tuxedos, representing every major family and corporation in the city. And at the center of it all, Colleen, wearing an ice blue gown that probably cost more than most people's cars but looked cheap against the room's opulence. She moved through the crowd like she owned it, because tonight, she would. The board of directors stood in a cluster near the main staircase, looking uncomfortable. They'd been the ones to demand Petra's attendance, but now they seemed uncertain why. Colleen had been spinning the narrative for weeks. Poor, unstable Petra, too damaged by grief to function in society, too unpredictable to run a company. "Where is she?" Thomas Brennan, the oldest board member, asked. "We were told she'd be here." Colleen's smile was practiced. Perfect. "I'm afraid Petra isn't feeling well. She wanted to attend, of course, but she lowered her voice conspiratorially. The poor girl just isn't equipped for events like this. Too much pressure. Too many memories of her father." The board members exchanged glances. Colleen pressed on, "Which is why I think we should move forward with tonight's announcement. Flores Textiles needs strong, stable leadership. Someone who can make difficult decisions without emotional interference." She paused. Let the implications sink in. "I believe I've proven myself this past year." Vivian Lancaster appeared at her elbow, champagne in hand. "Oh, you absolutely have, darling. The company's never been stronger." Several of Colleen's friends materialized around her, nodding agreement, a carefully orchestrated show of support. Thomas Brennan didn't look convinced. "The bylaws are clear, Mrs. Sanders. All direct descendants must be present for succession announcements. If Petra can't attend..." "She can't." Colleen's voice turned sharp. "She's upstairs, unwell. I can have Dr. Morrison provide documentation if needed." The lie hung in the air like smoke. And in the kitchen hallway, pressed against the wall where she could hear everything, Mrs. Park smiled. The clock struck 7. Colleen moved toward the microphone at the base of the grand staircase. The string quartet finished their piece. The room began to quiet. 500 conversations tapering to silence. This was the moment, the pivot point. Once Colleen made the announcement, once the board voted, it would be over. Legal, binding, irreversible. Colleen's hand closed around the microphone, and the ballroom doors opened. Petra had timed it perfectly. She stood in the doorway, backlit by the hallway chandelier, and let the room see her. The effect was instantaneous. Conversations died mid-sentence. Champagne glasses paused halfway to lips. The string quartet's cellist hit a wrong note. 500 people turned to stare, because the woman in the doorway wasn't an orphan in rags. She was a vision in crimson. The phoenix moved like liquid fire as Petra took her first step into the ballroom. The silk caught the light of 1,000 candles and threw it back as flame. The gold embroidery glittered. Her mother's diamonds at her ears caught the light from the chandeliers and sparked like stars. She looked like royalty, like wealth, like someone who'd been born to own this room and everyone in it. At the microphone, Colleen had frozen. The color drained from her face so fast it looked like someone had pulled a plug. Her hand was still on the microphone, her mouth open, no sound coming out. Petra walked forward. Not fast that would look desperate. Slow, measured, each step deliberate. The crowd parted for her automatically, instinctively, the way people move for someone who belongs. She could see them registering details. The dress clearly custom, clearly expensive. The way she moved trained, elegant, nothing like the broken girl they'd heard about. The way she held her head, not a victim, a queen. Whispers started. "Who is that? Is that Petra Flores?" I thought she was. Petra reached the base of the grand staircase and stopped. She looked up at Colleen, who was still frozen at the microphone on the landing above. "Hello, Colleen." Her voice carried across the silent ballroom, clear and calm. "I believe you were about to start without me." The silence stretched. Someone's phone camera flashed, then another. Within seconds, a dozen people were recording. Colleen's face cycled through emotions like a slot machine. Shock, rage, calculation. She settled on false concern, her media training kicking in. "Petra, darling." She forced a smile, but it looked like something dying. "I thought you were resting. You weren't feeling well." "I feel fine." Petra started up the staircase. The phoenix's skirt flowed behind her like a river of blood. "Actually, I feel better than I have in months." She reached the landing where Colleen stood. Up close, the difference was stark. Colleen's ice blue gown looked cheap, desperate. Her makeup was too heavy, her smile too fake. She looked like what she was new money trying to buy old class. Petra looked like she'd been born to it. "That's a lovely dress," Colleen managed. "Where did you—" "My father made it." Petra turned to face the crowd below. The cameras, the board, the guests who were watching history happen in real time. "Actually, we made it together, 2 years ago, before he died." She let that sink in. Let them do the math. 2 years ago, before Colleen, when Ricardo Flores was still healthy, still himself, Petra Colleen's voice had an edge now. "This isn't appropriate. You're not well. Perhaps we should—" "I'm perfectly well." Petra's voice cut through the ballroom like a knife. "In fact, I've never been more clear-headed. Which is why I'm here to contest your claim to my father's estate." The ballroom erupted. Gasps, exclamations, the sound of phones being pulled from purses and pockets. Thomas Brennan pushed through the crowd toward the staircase. Colleen's face went from pale to red. "You can't. The will was read. Everything was left to me. You have no claim." "Don't I?" Petra touched the bodice of her gown, felt the texture of the embroidery, felt her father's presence in every stitch. "That's interesting. Because this dress tells a different story." "Security!" Colleen hissed into her phone. "Now!" 2 men in black suits appeared at the ballroom entrance. Colleen pointed at Petra. "Remove this intruder. She's disturbed, unwell. She's gate-crashing my event." "Your event?" Petra's voice went cold. "This is the Sanders Legacy Ball, named for my family, my company, my legacy. The only intruder here is you." The security guards hesitated at the base of the stairs. These weren't Colleen's usual hired men. The board had insisted on the family's original security team for the ball. They'd worked for the Flores family for years. They'd known Petra since she was a child. Colleen's voice rose, panicked. "I said remove her!" "On what grounds?" Thomas Brennan's voice boomed across the ballroom. He'd reached the staircase, was climbing toward them. "Miss Flores is Ricardo's daughter. She has every right to be here. More right than anyone." "She was disinherited," Colleen snapped. "The will was forged." Petra said it quietly, but her voice carried. Every phone camera in the room swiveled toward her. "My father didn't write that will. You did, or had it written while he was dying, while he couldn't hold a pen." "That's slander," Colleen hissed. "You have no proof." "Don't I?" Petra turned, presented the back of her gown to the crowd. "The embroidery. Look closely." Thomas Brennan pulled out his phone, raised it, squinted. His face went from confused to shocked. "Is that—" QR codes. Dozens of them, woven into the embroidery so precisely they look like decoration. Petra's voice was steady. "My father was many things. A businessman, a designer, a planner. He knew what you were." She looked at Colleen. "He knew what you'd try to do." The crowd surged forward. Phones out, cameras scanning the embroidery. The first person to successfully scan a code gasped. "It's a video. It's Ricardo Flores. He's— oh my God." More phones, more scans, more gasps. "He's reading his real will. There are financial documents, showing transfers, hidden accounts, bank statements, medical records. He was being drugged, audio recordings." The ballroom exploded into chaos. People shouting, phones being passed around, the media contingent rushing forward. Colleen stood frozen, her face a mask of horror. "You can't. This isn't legal. Those could be faked." "They're not." Thomas Brennan's voice was stone. "I recognize the law firm's letterhead. These are authenticated documents." He looked at Colleen, and his expression was damning. "You fraudulent—" "Security!" Colleen screamed, but the guards weren't moving. They were staring at their own phones, at the evidence spreading through the room like wildfire. Petra descended one step, then another. The phoenix moved with her, crimson silk flowing like water, like blood, like victory. "My father left everything to me. The company, the estate, his legacy. He recorded his wishes in video testimony, witnessed by 3 lawyers. He documented your fraud in meticulous detail, and he hid it all in the one place he knew I'd find it." She touched the embroidery again, gentle, "in our work, in the gown we made together, in the proof that some things can't be stolen, only inherited." The board members were conferring in a tight huddle. Thomas Brennan broke away, climbed the stairs until he was level with Petra. "Miss Flores." His voice was formal, but his eyes were apologetic. "On behalf of the board of directors of Flores Textiles, I want to apologize. We should have investigated more thoroughly. We should have protected you." Petra nodded. "Yes, you should have." Colleen made a sound like a wounded animal. "This is insane. You're all insane." She was trying to back away now, trying to reach the door. "That girl is unstable. Everyone knows it. I had doctors." "Paid doctors," someone in the crowd called out. "The evidence is right here." Another voice. "She falsified the will," and another. "She's been stealing from the company for a year." Colleen turned to run. The security guards moved then, but not for Petra. They blocked Colleen's exit, firm and professional. "Mrs. Sanders," one of them said quietly, "we're going to need you to come with us. The police have been notified." "No." Colleen's voice was ragged. "No, you don't understand. I built this. I saved this company. That girl couldn't run it. She's weak. She's broken. She's the CEO." Thomas Brennan's voice was final. He turned to Petra, and in front of 500 witnesses, in front of every camera in the room, he held out his hand. "Miss Flores, welcome home." Petra took his hand. The phoenix caught the light and burned. Colleen was escorted out through the kitchen entrance, screaming about lawyers and lawsuits and injustice. Her friends had vanished into the crowd, suddenly very interested in the floral arrangements. The ballroom buzzed like a hive. Petra stood at the top of the stairs, looking down at faces she'd known her whole life. Some looked ashamed, others looked thrilled. All of them looked at her differently now. Thomas Brennan raised his voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, it appears we have something different to announce tonight." He turned to Petra. "Miss Flores, would you like to address your company?" Petra looked at the microphone, at the room full of people, at the future spreading out before her like crimson silk. She stepped up to the microphone, adjusted it slightly, and spoke. "6 months ago, I lost my father." She paused. "Or I thought I did. But it turns out you can't lose someone who teaches you to survive, who teaches you to plan, who teaches you that elegance isn't about being seen, it's about being undeniable." Her voice grew stronger. "My father built Flores Textiles on the principle that what we wear tells our story, that fabric has memory, that every thread carries meaning." She touched the phoenix's bodice. "Tonight, this dress told the truth. And from now on, that's what this company will do. We'll tell the truth in every garment. We'll honor craft over speed, legacy over profit. We'll make things that last." The room erupted in applause. Cameras flashed like stars. Petra smiled. It wasn't cruel anymore. It was something else. Something new. "To new beginnings," she said, "and to rising from the ashes." The party that followed was surreal. People wanted to touch the dress, to see the embroidery up close, to apologize for believing Colleen's lies. Petra accepted it all with grace, though her face hurt from smiling. Mrs. Park appeared with champagne. "For the CEO," she said, her eyes still wet. Petra took it, sipped, and felt the bubbles burn. She'd never tasted champagne before. It was good. By midnight, most of the guests had left. The board members had departed after scheduling an emergency meeting for Monday. The media had gotten their photos and their story. The ballroom was empty except for the catering staff cleaning up, and Petra standing at the balcony overlooking the main floor. The Flores estate. Her home. Finally, actually hers. She heard footsteps behind her. Thomas Brennan, holding his coat. "Your father would be proud," he said quietly. "This was quite the plan. It was his plan. I just wore it." "No," he smiled. "You executed it. There's a difference." He paused. "The board meeting Monday. We'll formalize everything. Transfer control. Clean up Colleen's mess. It won't be easy. I didn't think it would be. You'll have enemies. People who backed Colleen. Investors who won't want to take orders from a 22-year-old. Let them try to stop me." Brennan laughed. "Yes, I think they'll regret it if they do." He headed for the door, then turned back. "Welcome home, Miss Flores. The real one this time." When he was gone, Petra stood alone in the ballroom. The phoenix pooled around her feet like spilled paint, like victory. She pulled out her phone and opened the camera, angled it to catch the dress, her face, the ballroom behind her. "Subscribe to see how this unfolds," she said to the lens. "And comment where you're watching from. I will love to say hello to you, just to know how far our story is going." She posted it. Within seconds, the comments started flooding in. "Lagos. Queen behavior London. This is the best thing I've ever seen New York. She ate and left no crumbs. Sao Paulo. The phoenix rises." Petra smiled, turned off her phone, and walked up the grand staircase one more time. Not to the attic, to her old room, the master suite. The door was open. Inside, she could see her father's desk, her mother's vanity, the bed she'd slept in as a child. Home. She stood in the doorway for a long moment, still wearing the phoenix, still wearing her crown of braids, still wearing the weight of everything that had happened. Then she stepped inside and closed the door. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Building a company, honoring a legacy, living up to a name that meant something. But tonight, she was just Petra Flores. Orphan, survivor, heiress. The girl who'd been buried in ashes and rose wearing fire. She walked to the window and looked out at the city, at the lights spreading to the horizon like stars, like diamonds, like proof that pressure makes beautiful things. "Thank you, Papa," she whispered again. And somewhere, in the fabric of the universe where fathers watch their daughters become queens, Ricardo Flores smiled. Can Petra reclaim an empire built on lies? And what final secret did her father hide in the threads of her inheritance? Smash that subscribe button because you do not want to miss what happens when the board tries to take it all back. This story is about to get even more intense. Drop a comment. Do you think Petra can survive as CEO? Or will Colleen's allies destroy her? Like this video if you're obsessed with this revenge story that keeps delivering. Subscribe to see how this unfolds and comment where you're watching from. I will love to say hello to you just to know how far our story is going. The next chapter drops soon, and trust me, you are not ready for what Petra does next. See you in the next one, if the phoenix keeps burning.